Doamnelor, domnilor, bine v-am găsit la Impact Plus, o serie de interviuri despre războiul hibrid pe care Federația Rusă îl duce în special împotriva unor state de la granița estică a Uniunii Europene. Astăzi vorbim cu domnul Gaga Gogoladze, fondatorul Georgian Center Abroad, o asociație de activiști georgieni care o mare parte dintre ei sunt în afara țării, au fost nevoiți să fugă în afara țării din cauza situației politice din Georgia. Mr. Gogoladze, thank you very much for accepting this interview and good afternoon. Welcome to TVR Moldova.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Mr. Gogoladze, for the beginning, for our viewers who don't know what happened now in Georgia, please relate what is the situation now in your country.
My country is currently in a very deep political crisis, unfortunately. It has started quite long ago, but the very important culmination point was the parliamentary election of last year, in October last year. It's been almost a year, where we saw a very massive election fraud, where we saw that the election results were rigged, not only according to the local actors, but also according to the multitude of international observer missions, and also afterwards sort of the analysts, and that resulted in a ongoing, very long sort of protest waves, which became much stronger after the so-called prime minister announced that they would also suspend any negotiations with European Union regarding the EU accession of Georgia. And we've been ever since in this mode that none of our Western partners pretty much recognize the current de facto government in Georgia. But we also don't see, some of the members have been also sanctioned by various European states. But same time, it's everyone is sort of waiting how the situation, how the political process is going to play out on the streets. And what we see on the streets is sort of waves of stronger protests, but it's a daily occurrence, obviously. But we see sometimes much stronger protests. Sometimes it gets a little bit less. And just yesterday, we had quite violent clashes between the protesters and pro-government thugs. This is basically the youth organization of Georgian Dream. Georgian Dream being this sort of the current ruling party. And this is, so we are now also expecting sort of international reactions on that as well. And in the meantime, we have a huge wave of political prisoners, basically, because we have the leaders of various opposition parties have been arrested. Lots of activists have been arrested and sentenced already. We also have a very important media manager and another journalist also been arrested, already sentenced to prison times. And we see a very heavy crackdown for the past couple weeks also on the big civil society actors, like the 6 major NGOs who are being now accused of basically planning a coup, so trying to finance a coup in Georgia, anti-government coup in Georgia. This is in a nutshell the situation.
Is Georgia still a country with European vision, with European aspiration, or already it's one affiliated of Russia? Let's speak about point of view of people and the point of view of government.
Yes. That is a very important, of course, Russia is the central issue in all this situation. If it was not for Russian support, I guess this regime would not stand a chance even for a day. You have to understand that in Georgia, even after all the efforts that these people have been putting for many, many years, especially through propaganda, because they have a very strong propaganda machine that constantly keeps blaming European Union for various crimes against our culture, against our sovereignty, etc. There is still something like 70, with the most recent studies, about 78% of the population is firmly convinced that our future, the Georgia's future, lies with Europe and within the European Union, This includes even the people who actually vote for this current government party. The problem, how and you even saw it in, for example, in the last elections, or even now, we have on 4th of October, we have another election coming that is for basically for the local election, and most of the opposition parties are not participating, boycotting these elections, and even here and in the previous elections, we see that even this very pro-Russian, clearly the party that is oriented much more towards Russia, towards Iran, towards China, rather than to our historical partners, US and the European Union, or for that matter, even Moldova, Ukraine, the countries that are not sort of part of European Union, but are sort of aspiring towards that Western vision. Even that party in their elections, they try to sell themselves as a party that wants to bring Georgia to European Union, but then they make this propaganda twist that they want to do it with dignity. And dignity means for them going to means some kind of very Orban or Fico-like vision of European Union, that basically I am going to be receiving all the benefits that I can receive from European Union, but same time I will be able to stay as corrupt as I want, and sort of to build a mafia state that where I will be able to consolidate my power, while still sort of sitting on this on the stream of help that I will be receiving from European Union. So this is the situation, but the majority of population is obviously very pro-European. We generally have a very strained relationship with Russia, and so that has a historic grounds, obviously, but also then the war in 2008 against Russia has cemented that region. So for Georgia, that is some of the most traumatic experiences of our past 35 years of independence, and before 200 years, are related to our sort of arch enemy, Russia.
Mr. Gogoladze, what Georgia is resemble now? Like Ukraine under Yanukovych, or like Belarus under Lukashenko?
Oh, I'm afraid I usually sort of try to stay away from these kind of comparisons. But yeah, it's absolutely very legitimate sort of question. It's something new. It's something new in many ways, because the reason I try to sort of stay away from these comparisons is we had, for example, when the new wave of protests started, because our protests have been going on for a very long time. And the Georgian Dream has tried to, I mean, they have been pro-Russian from the day one, right? This is a very Russian project, especially considering that it is headed by a person, Bidzina Ivanishvili, who made his entire fortune in Russia, and he was not just some kind of a private sector businessman actor in Russia. He was one of the people who participated in political processes of Russia of 90s, like when the Yeltsin was changed by Putin, and then there was also the entire crackdown on the whole sort of the private sector at the time, and he was there and he was part of that process. And so there is no doubt in my mind that this is a from the beginning, very Russian project. But since the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, we saw basically until 2022, this party has been trying to portray themselves as pro-European, and ever since that moment, they have changed their course very rapidly very openly towards pro-Russian rhetoric and pro-Russian sort of politics. Regarding the comparison, basically, ever since the latest sort of protest wave started, we've been receiving this question of what are we dealing with? Is this kind of situation that is similar to the Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine, or similar to the political unrest and the process in 2020 in Belarus? And unfortunately, this is something very new and very we are in uncharted territory in many ways, because the hybrid warfare that Russia is involved in now, it has always been there, obviously, but it has become so much stronger. Like we see Russians trying to actively interfere with elections, not just in the neighboring countries and not just in the countries that are they already have the history of imperialism and colonialism, but also in the countries, including like Western Europe, where they try to sort of interfere with the elections and interfere with the political process and will of people. And similarly, what we have is that our regime has learned a lot, not just like indirectly by watching the processes in 2014 and 2020, but literally like our riot police that has been sort of the cornerstone of silencing the dissent in Georgia, the political dissent, on the streets by beating up people unconscious and arresting them completely without any due process, and then just torturing afterwards. Like, because if your hands are tied, you are put in some kind of a dark minivan and you are beaten. That's not just sort of riot police dispersing the protest. That's a torture, right? And this police has been directly receiving the training from Belarusian colleagues, basically. They're sort of Belarusian security forces. So what we see right now, and what is very problematic, is that we see that the enemies of democracy, they are interconnected more than ever, and they are constantly exchanging, they're learning from each other's mistakes. For example, in Georgia, one of the newest developments this year was that we have the surveillance cameras on the streets that are associated with Chinese company that manufactures surveillance cameras connected with artificial intelligence, that basically every corner of the street right now, of the sort of the main streets where usually the whole political process takes place, especially like protests, etc., but also like just gatherings where you can have some kind of opinion building. This is like every corner of it is completely surveilled with the use of artificial intelligence. So we see that the surveillance state in Georgia right now is super strong, and the security apparatus is very strong, and the propaganda is also very, very strong. So in all honesty, I'm obviously very, very optimistic about our future and about our fight, because we see that regime is crumbling in many ways, and they started already sort of eating each other and trying to sort of they have a lot of infighting now going on. But same time, I have to say that the more than comparing the Georgia situation with the past, what I'm more focused on is what we can learn from what's going on now in Georgia, and then use that in the future for other countries and other situations.
So Russia accompanies its military war in Ukraine with hybrid aggression against several European countries. How it's affected Georgia from this point of view, from a hybrid war?
That is a very good question. What I am very proud of is that we have sort of clearly agents of Russian influence both inside Georgia and outside. we have actors who are right now in Russia. I don't consider these people Georgian at all, but they have Georgian last names and who are actively advocating the interests of Georgian dream there, and are trying to sort of establish relationships with the separatist entities, the Ukrainian territories that are now that Russia claims to be now the part of Russia, etc. So what we have also is that's the recent development that I would like to address it. That's very important. Is we have not just political but judicial harassments and also serious danger against the Georgians who have been fighting in Ukraine on the side of Ukraine. And that is, we are talking about quite a large number of people, especially for a small country like Georgia. There are, I think, currently up to 4,000 Georgians fighting on the side of Ukraine. And these people are usually, many of them are ex-military personnel, and they face serious legal problems then in Georgia once they come back. So they have their houses are often sort of raided. They have trouble getting various licenses. Those who have, for example, open carry licenses for firearms, they have lose these licenses, and they are being harassed on the sort of at the request of Russian security force authorities, and for the most recent case of that was that the fighter with who has sort of also Armenian background has been detained. He's a Georgian citizen who fights in Ukraine as a part of Georgian Legion. And he was detained on the border between Armenia and Georgia when he was coming back home because so about a year ago, Donetsk court has, so Sham court in Donetsk has sentenced him for terrorism for quite a big, sort of gave him a quite big prison sentence in absentia. And now we are facing this very unusual situation that Armenia might deport this person to Russia. And we are also sort of trying to start a campaign to stop this from happening, because obviously there is no, there is not even an illusion of any kind of justice in Russia, first of all. And secondly, this is a Georgian citizen, and there is no, the Donetsk Sham court has, of course, no authority on his freedom. With regards to more Russian influence, what we definitely see is this the Russian language in Georgia is quite unpopular, to be honest. Obviously, in older generation, there are a lot of people who sort of grew up, were born and grew up in Soviet Union, and they still remember Russian. But in my generation already, Russian is very, very unpopular. Very few people speak it. Most of people understand it, but very few speak. And therefore, for Russia, it's very hard to directly sort of transmit its propaganda into Georgia because of the language barrier. Unfortunately, what we have is that then we have Georgian televisions that are primarily sort of directly associated with the current government, so-called government. They are basically creating this the Georgian version of the Russian propaganda, which does not really, like, if you listen to the narratives, it's a very lazy work. This is pretty much the translation of the narratives that have been sort of existing in the Russian informational sphere for decades, I would say. But with like a little bit more Georgian twist, and with a little bit more of this twist of Georgian dream about some kind of sovereignty from the European Union with dignity, etc. And the main narrative currently, which is the peace narrative. So the Georgian dreams propaganda rests on the idea that and they have just sort of institution, they try to make this a law at this with their so-called parliament. That the war in 2008 was a Georgian provocation, and Georgia started the war in 2008 against Russia. This is a narrative that they even advocate on the international level, which to a great pleasure and great happiness of Russia and of Russian actors, including names such as Medvedev and Lavrov, etc. And what their claim is that basically they are the only chance for peace. So if you watch our the propaganda machine, you're gonna hear that they're constantly talking about that it's either us or war, but they never talk about war with whom. It's always like we are the party of peace, everybody else they sort of put in this envelope together with the previous government, which was a United National Movement under Saakashvili, which probably some of your viewers are familiar with. And they are the party of war, even though our opposition landscape is much more sort of broad and diverse. Still, there's everybody else is a party of war. We are the party of peace, but war with whom? Never. Russia is never mentioned. There is never mentioned that actually who's the enemy is never mentioned. Even the war against Ukraine, the Russian war against Ukraine, is in this narrative blamed on the West, on NATO, and there's this very, very standard sort of Russian propaganda, which you probably see in Moldova as well.
So you mentioned about Saakashvili. We recalled the visits of American presidents in Tbilisi, a lot of European leaders in Tbilisi. Tell me, please, when did Georgia derail from this democratic road?
This is a very complex question, and I would say the under Saakashvili, the credit needs to be given where it's due, but also sort of responsibility needs to be taken for all things that happened, right? So under Saakashvili, we saw a very rapid reform policies that changed the economy of the country, changed lots of things, changed the all the security apparatus, changed the economy, changed the a lot of societal structures, including education, etc. So we had a very strong neoliberal the reforms, the economic reforms had a very strong neoliberal twist, which led to a rapid growth in terms of like GDP, but it also did not the question of equality did not really manage to keep the pace with this economic developments. Same time, later on, during this the rule of UNM, we also saw a very rapid and very strong increase in securitization of politics. So the very strong police, very strict anti-drug laws, for example, the judiciary that was also very handing out very draconian sentences for even minor crimes, and that itself created an environment of dissatisfaction among Georgians. Same time, what you can never blame the previous government for is the treason, right? So the previous government always stayed true to the historic course of Georgia, and the wish of the Georgian people, that is that our site is always directed westwards, being that European Union, being that NATO membership, and being a very strong ally of United States. Just to mention that in both in Iraq and Afghanistan, Georgia participated as a non-NATO member with the biggest, with the largest, definitely it's at any point with the largest contingent of the army. And this was our our geopolitical and IR choice, that this is where we are going. And this also, I can proudly say that this also inspired, I believe, a lot of other our friendly nations to do the same, because suddenly you had this example that, yeah, you don't, even if you are geographically situated next to Russia, you don't, this is your fate is not sealed. You don't have to be a satellite state of Russia, because being a satellite state of Russia always means poverty, despair, corruption, and sort of even worse things that sort of result from that. And so this was definitely the case, and I think that the main sort of the twisting point was 2008 war, when Russia decided to, on the one hand, when Russia decided to punish Georgia for trying to be independent and being a sovereign nation. And was quite successful in that too, because even though it did not manage to occupy large parts of Georgia, it did occupy. It was already occupying parts of Georgia, about 20%, a little bit below 20%. Now it's a little bit above 20%, I would say. So they occupied new territories. They created. They once again sort of created this idea for people in Europe who want to believe this, that Georgia is unstable and unreliable. And in parallel to that, in 2008, we also saw that Georgia was denied the accession to NATO. And these things sort of played into each other. So it could create certain dissatisfaction among Georgians, certain trauma among Georgians, and also we saw that in 2008 and those change in administration in United States as well. So in 2009, the Obama came, and the Obamas had a very different approach to Russia as compared to Bush, the George Bush before that, or even his opponent, like the main opponent during the elections, Senator McCain, which at the time I did not appreciate as much, but now thinking back, I mean, if John McCain had become the president of the United States, we would have probably a very different environment now in Europe politically. So basically what happened was that this was a slow process of Georgians liking the Saakashvili government less and less. Same time, the doors towards West closing more and more, and Russia trying to infiltrate Georgian politics more and more. And then Ivanishvili came in 2012. As in my opinion, as a very clear sort of continuation of that process. And that sealed the deal to some extent. At least he came to power, but he would not be able to come to power just on his own. So what he did was he united lots of, at the time, very pro-Western opposition parties too. And because of this, the first 4 years of Ivanishvili's rule, when he was himself part of it, he was also himself a prime minister, because he doesn't have a political role, active political role right now. But at the time, he even had an active political role. We had still this sort of trajectory continuing, so that we are more continuous. So we are accessing, like we are getting closer and closer to European Union. A lot of projects continue that were before that. New projects were started, and there was more. I believe that a lot of people had this illusion, you can call it an illusion, or this understanding that even within the party of Ivanishvili, you could, if you were a very pro-European politician, there was still some space to work towards better future of Georgia. And that includes politicians on the one hand, who are now completely in the opposition, but also includes administrative staff or diplomatic corpus, etc. Right? The people who are sort of the career diplomats who have no loyalty towards Ivanishvili, but they would continue to stay in the work in the embassies and try to represent Georgia and not represent the Ivanishvili government. Unfortunately, what we see now, even this is sort of the very important litmus test or very important field where you can see this change. The diplomatic corpus is entirely gutted, pretty much. So all the people who could, the most of the people who have worked tirelessly for decades for the Western course of Georgia, they are they getting kicked out. Or they mostly are already completely cleaned out from the clans from any important roles, be it in domestic politics or international politics. And they are replaced by complete yes men, by people who are willing to sign anything that Ivanishvili is giving them, and who are really sort of following this directive that we don't want. It's not really that we want to promote the Ivanishvili politics outside, but rather make sure that in Western media or in Western politics, Georgia is not an issue at all. So nobody talks about Georgia. Nobody cares about Georgia. Leave us alone. We're going to take care of ourselves, basically. And we're going to take care of ourselves means that we're going to arrest opposition. We're going to crack down on private sector completely. We're going to crack down on the civil society and obviously the media, right? So the independent media has been very huge target for the this sort of repression policies. So yes, this is the situation with regard to this change. But again, until 2022, and I guess partly also because the European prospect was very ambiguous until that point, it must be said that despite the fact that we had the visa liberalization, we had candidate status was a little bit later, but we had this very gradual accession. Still, the idea of Georgia, or for that matter, Ukraine and Moldova becoming the members of European Union until 2022 was much more murky. And after 22, when this prospect actually, thanks to the sacrifice and thanks to the bravery of Ukrainian people, this door opened. The narrative has the window has shifted of understanding what is possible and what is not. And at some point, the Georgian so-called authorities were faced with the real issue that it might become a reality that the Georgia might actually become part of European Union, and that probably did not sit well with their Russian bosses. So that's
Mr.
when
Gaga
they
Gogoladze,
changed.
Thank you very much for this interview, for a lot of information. We are waiting you to TVR Moldova. Unfortunately, we have not more time. Thank you very much again for this interview.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Doamnelor și domnilor, vă mulțumim și dumneavoastră că ne urmăriți. Ne puteți urmări și pe rețelele noastre de socializare. Acesta a fost Impact Plus, primul interviu din această serie în care încercăm să descoperim cum și ce tehnici folosește Kremlinul pentru a-și duce război hibrid împotriva țărilor, în special cele care au aspirații europene. Rămâneți cu TVR.